Welcome to the Can't Stop the Growth podcast, the home service podcast dedicated to personal and leadership development. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and this week I am joined by a new guest. If you're ready to grow as a leader, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and I have a very special guest on here today with me. Chuck Knabusch is the founder and principal of 1310 Business Solutions. He is a best-selling author and leadership expert, helping to guide other leaders through the planning and execution process. Chuck works to support and assist various leaders, businesses, and organizations to improve their operation, resulting in bottom line increases and ultimately what we're all after, more time. Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Chad. Appreciate that.
Yeah, excited to have you on here as someone who definitely is ingrained in kind of the leadership and operational efficiencies of an organization. So why don't we first start off, maybe give us a little bit of your background so listeners have a little bit of basis for where you're coming from.
Yeah, after high school, tried the college thing. It wasn't for me immediately. So after I got my letter from University of Michigan that said, please don't return, I went to the United States Army. I spent 7 years there, got out, did 2 years with the Michigan Army National Guard, went on to a 28-year career with Lazy Boy Incorporated, got my degree, got my master's degree, retired in 2018, and my former employer asked me to come back for a project. So I did as a consultant, did that until COVID hit, stepped away again. And then they asked me to come back probably 6 months into the COVID issue. And I came back for about another year. After that, I spent, 4 or 5 months writing a book, another 4 or 5 months getting it published. And now I'm out trying to go ahead and work with small to mid-sized businesses to help those leaders improve their operations.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll have a ton to dive into here. Obviously, you've had a lengthy career. You're spending time with small to medium-sized businesses now. What are those 2 or 3 things that you, I guess, see more often in businesses and where they're needing help at?
Well, I mean, one thing is just expectations, setting and then managing the expectations. A lot of times, we as customers will go to a business and say, hey, we want this. And maybe it'll be something that takes a little bit more time. It's, I'll use a contractor as an example. We put in a pool during COVID. So we asked the contractor, well, how long is this going to take? Once the dirt gets turned, it'll be about 6 weeks, but it'll be a while before we start turning dirt. Okay. I understand there was a lot of pools going in with COVID. Everybody was staying home. So, and then he also said, well, it'd be about another 3 days for every day of rain. So again, we asked for, and he set expectations, but then he didn't manage them when it took us 21 months before we were swimming. So 6 weeks, 21 months, big discrepancy back and forth. I mean, and I don't use that to beat up on the contractor or anything else, but I think that's a great example of how we can not only set expectations, but manage those as we go ahead and work with our clients, our customers, could be our suppliers, our vendors, even our employees. Because again, we as humans are always kind of looking, what's the next thing? What's the next milestone? What's the next plateau? How are we going to get there? And setting and managing expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you brought up a great point there of where, a lot of managers, leaders, they get this new process rolled out, or they have that service meeting and it's, yay, we've got a new thing. This should be great. And then a month goes by and everybody's like, well, what happened? And we fail to kind of dig in and manage those expectations along the way when people need help. What are some of the things that you maybe recommend to clients or that you've seen that have worked well as it relates to kind of managing those expectations?
Well, yeah, I think you talk about process, and I think communication can be a process also. In the case of something that's going to take 6 weeks, maybe it's a once a week message that the contractor would say, providing an update. Hey, we did hit this milestone, or we're 2 days behind this milestone. It'll push us another week. Or, hey, I've lost my subcontractors. Let's go ahead and to me, to get those good subcontractors, it might take me a couple extra weeks, but I want to make sure I ensure the quality of the product I'm providing you. So again, I like standard work. I like to set up processes. And I think, in this case, for a 6-week project, it may be just a once a week touch base. It could be an email, could be a text, could be a phone call. Whatever communication method works best for the contractor and the client, or the business and the customer, is fine, because that's not necessarily the point, but it's that you are communicating, and you're communicating not just the good stuff. Hey, we got everything done and we're moving on, but you're also going ahead and taking those hard communications where you're communicating the stuff that didn't go so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes the communication of the things that aren't going so well is even more comforting than knowing that it's going well. Everybody can see a project moving along. You could see the pool getting installed. However, you may not know some of the behind the scenes things. And to me, it's always been like, I can sympathize with stuff that happens. I just need to know. You talk a little bit about creating training programs, and training here at Peterman Brothers is front and center. I was involved in a sales training where we had, I think, there was probably 40 people in the room this morning, and just going over different things. What's kind of your philosophy on creating training programs, and what do those how do those kind of aid in the business? I mean, there's the obvious, right? Training, well, they're going to be better, but where else do you see that aiding in the business?
Well, let's take a half step back. I mean, a lot of small companies, it may be the owner, it may be one of his people who's training somebody for a new position, or for maybe to take over their position. Well, again, what they're not probably doing is handing that new person, here's a note, here's a process, here's what you're supposed to go ahead and follow. This is what you're supposed to do daily or weekly or monthly or whatever. Instead, they're taking them down, sitting down by a computer, and they're typing out a bunch of stuff, and the new person's scratching out all these notes. Well, those notes become the first training document. Now, is that going to go ahead and result in the process output that you're looking for? Maybe, maybe not, because you're trusting that they heard everything you said in the way you said it, and that you didn't skip something when you transferred that knowledge. We kind of like to call that tribal knowledge. And tribal knowledge is not always the best way to go ahead and do it. So I try and encourage business owners, department heads, business leaders, document your process, because you can use it in training. You can use it to audit the process. And the only way you know that training is good is bring an outsider in, hand them the training material. I want to watch you walk through the process. Yes, it might take 15 minutes, might take an hour, whatever. But by seeing an outsider who is unfamiliar with the process work through it and follow the document, you'll find all the mistakes in the document, or you'll say, wait a second, that's not what we're doing anymore. You'll go ahead and find that you've moved beyond that process and you haven't updated your documentation. So again, very simple way to go ahead and look at training, look at the documentation, but it then goes ahead and starts to build for so many other things. Because ultimately, when you go into any quality program, whether it's an ISO 9000 type of program or any of the others that are out there, they're going to say, hey, do you have your processes documented? Do you have training? Do you have all this stuff? And you can say, yes, I've already got it. I've built the foundation. And from there, we can go ahead and continue to build wherever we want to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That's something that we've instituted in our business here over the last year. Is any communication that goes out about a big change or a company-wide notification or whatever, we pass it through kind of gates, and it's, hey, read over this. And a lot of the times it's, hey, show this to your wife who doesn't work here, and if she can understand it, then we're crystal clear on what it is that we've said. And I feel like sometimes even us in the past, we'd send out the communication. We're like, well, I sent that out last week. Why is no one listening? Or why is no one doing it right? And it's like, well, they probably didn't understand, but they didn't knock on your door and say, hey, what the heck are you talking about here?
Absolutely. Well, and I know I was really guilty of the really, really long email, because I wanted to go ahead and send emails that everybody knew there weren't going to be a million questions after. But realistically, while that was good on the one hand, it was bad on the other hand, because the people who kind of knew what we were talking about, they didn't want the long format. They wanted an executive summary. So on some of those, it's like, throw in an executive summary. Let the people kind of read the short stuff, and those that have the questions, let them go ahead and read the longer stuff. And I mean, you can even kind of take that same approach with training and with process documentation. Okay, here's the quick and the dirty, the high level, but include the more detailed version also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely multiple forms of communication are always a good thing, because people digest things in such different ways. For me, I can't read a long email. I get to paragraph 2 and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Only to see 4 more after that. But let's dive into kind of your consulting firm here. Tell us a little bit about what that does and how that may be able to benefit business owners. What kind of projects are you tackling typically?
I mean, 1310 Business Solutions, I like to work on operations. And by operations, you kind of think in some ways manufacturing or logistics, and we certainly go ahead and do those. And I've done those in the past. But it can also be, the small architectural firm that is running multiple projects, and you pick up the phone and you say, hey, how's my project going? Well, we haven't really worked on it, but now that you called, we'll work on it. So their project management methodology, their prioritization, was all about what customer goes ahead, calls, and complains the loudest. Now, it may work. The owner and the business may get great profits, may have plenty of work for all sorts of reasons, but they're upsetting both the employees as well as the customers, because nobody wants to have to call and hear, well, we haven't done anything, but now that you've called, we're going to jump right on it. It's also tough on the employees, because they might be dead into something. I mean, really in the zone, really being efficient, doing the drawings, updating the engineering, everything like that. And all of a sudden, drop everything because, Sally called. So we're going to go ahead and jump onto Sally's stuff. Well, now you've got to kind of close up the project that you're working on, set it aside in a way that you can pick it up again later, jump on Sally's project. And then an hour later, Bob calls, and guess what? We're jumping onto Bob's project. So again, having a methodology, having a prioritization, understanding that there's going to be ebbs and flows in projects. You're going to have to, in many cases, work on multiple projects at a time. But, your operation can't go ahead and be by whatever customer screams the loudest and be successful long-term with your employees, with your customers, because again, you're just creating stress on both sides and inefficiency and everything else. So we like to go ahead and look at operations in a very broad term and go ahead and help the companies fix whatever operational component. Again, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. I couldn't go ahead and tell them how to do a CAD drawing right or wrong. I can read a print, but that's about it. But I could certainly go ahead and help them come up with a methodology that was better than the one that they were using. I worked with my former employer. We actually put in some new manufacturing facilities during COVID, because they had such a huge demand. Doing training, I rewrote a whole training manual for them for a system that I had implemented while I was an employee. So we can go ahead and do things from very large projects to very small projects, just focusing on some basic methodologies, some lean principles. Everybody thinks of lean only in manufacturing. Lean can go ahead and be applied to office situations and anywhere else, because it's all about understanding value from the customer's perspective and getting rid of waste.
Yeah, I think that you pointed out a number of great things there. I think that Sometimes the lack of process not only hurts the company, but it hurts the customer, as you pointed out in your pool example. Lack of process and procedure there, and then I think it also has a tendency, and you alluded to this in your answer, was it can also affect our team. If we don't have proper procedures and processes in place, ultimately they're the ones that bear the burden of coming face to face with the customer and presenting the bad news because, oh, we don't have a process for that and that doesn't work, and this, that, and the other, and then ultimately become frustrated with probably the organization at the end of the day. And then you may be losing bad talent, or you may be losing good talent because you don't have your stuff involved. What are some of the effects you've seen as far as implementing process and procedure and the impact that they've had on culture at a company?
I mean, I think the first thing is when you implement process, you have to talk with the employees doing it. Have to really get down and work with those operators, because they're going to have a fear that you're going to automate or that you're going to go ahead and try and get rid of them. And that's not it whatsoever. In some companies, they're going to have a fear that, well, you really don't want them. You don't want their input. You just want them kind of doing the muscle work to keep the machine fed, et cetera. And that's not the case either. We as humans are fantastic creatures in that we're always driving to go ahead and become more efficient, to take a shortcut, to go ahead, find a better way of doing it. And those people doing the job day in, day out, they're the ones who are going to find it. It's not a consultant who comes in. It's not the management team, unless you've kind of come up from the floor and you've seen how that stuff works. So it's a matter of going to them and building the trust so they can understand the process. Why are you doing it? Yes, we may need to go ahead and make some improvements, but that's not to go ahead and get rid of the employees. That's to go ahead and help develop the employees to the next level while going ahead and getting some savings so we can go ahead and afford next year's pay raise type of thing. So, first it's driving the fear out of the organization. And then it's really having those conversations, going out to where the work takes place, whether it's on a shop floor or it's in an office, and paying attention to what's going on, asking questions, driving down, asking why is this being done? Why is it being done this way? Is there a reason, or is it just because that's what we've always done? Because there may be a better way. There may be a better tool we can go ahead and implement. So, a lot of it is even understanding process improvement while we're just even documenting the process. And again, by asking a lot of those questions, a lot of times an operator or an employee will say, well, push back. Well, why are you doing this? No, we're not doing it because you're doing something wrong. We're trying to go ahead and just understand what you're doing and the rationale behind it. And usually once you get talking to people like that, and just have that conversation, they open up, they're willing to go ahead and show you exactly how things work, show you the pros, show you the cons, show you the shortcuts, and show you the stuff that absolutely aggravates them, which is the kind of the gold nugget that you need to go ahead and give that employer to say, hey, this would be something that if you worked on, you'd make your people really, really happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, over my years, I've made the mistake of, hey, this sounds like a great process, and you roll it out and you get crickets because it's like, what are you thinking? Our business, 2/3 of our people are out in the field every day, talking with customers and stuff like that. And sometimes when a process gets developed inside the office, it translates a bit differently out in the field. And what I have also found is that, to your point of talking to the people, is they often know a better way to do it. They're just doing it like you told them to, yet they probably have a lot of input as to how to make something better. And a lot of that is just them understanding the entire process. They see what they do, but they may not know what somebody else does in accounting or someone in the call center or whatever it is. And trying to understand that whole process is something that we've really tried to drive home by even having new hires sit with other departments. Like, hey, you hear about this department, here's what they do, and here's how you can make their life easier, and here's how they're going to try to make yours easier.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, When I first became a production manager, I walked in 200 people. They were cutting plywood and OSB to make parts. And, you bring them all into the break room, they think you're going to go ahead and provide a whole bunch of wisdom. And the first thing I told them is, I want to pick your brain. They're like, what? Why? Because you will always know how to do your job better than I do. I'll go out there, I'll flip a couple sheets, I'll load the router with a couple sheets of plywood with you so I can kind of get a sense of it. But I'm not going to be doing it 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. One, that's not my job. Yes, I want to kind of get a little bit of understanding, but I will never get the depth of understanding that you will have. And they kind of came back to me, Chuck, we've always been told that, we're only here for our muscle, that nobody really wants our thoughts and our mind and our brains. I said, no. I said, I can't speak for the management before me, but what I will go ahead and I can speak for myself is, no, I want your mind as much as your body. In fact, I'd love to go ahead and have your mind more than your body and make your job easier on your body. Because again, otherwise you will wear out. You cannot go ahead and possibly do this for a 30, 40-year type of career. Because it was a very, very manual labor, very muscular type of thing. And some people couldn't handle that for a lot of years. So really, we wanted to go ahead and make that job easier and better. And because of their input, we were able to find and design routers that actually picked up the sheet of plywood and self-loaded. So all they had to go ahead and do is pick the parts off and clean the sawdust up. So it did become a much better job for them in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so often we look at process improvement as a way to make more money. How do we make this more efficient so that we can squeeze more profit out of what we're doing? And I think that you hit the nail on the head where a lot of the times, at least in my mind, is if we can drive that efficiency and process to make the lives of our people better, that revenue will come in all of their learnings and making it easier for them. And just like you pointed out in an example, we have a very similar situation with some of our installers and people who are crawling around in attics and crawl spaces and doing heavy lifting. It's like, how do we make your job easier so that maybe your career is longer, or how do we give you training so that it can set you up for that next position as you continue to grow, and then can help others along the way?
Absolutely.
What are those 2 or 3 characteristics, especially when it comes to change management, that you see in really good leaders who are able to lead through that, which is always a tough process? No one likes change.
We went through a change to cellular manufacturing in, I don't know, 2006, 7, 8, somewhere around there. And at the time, I was a production manager, but our senior vice president of operations and our vice president of manufacturing came down to every plant. And they said, look, we've got to go ahead and do this. They made the case as to why it had to happen. And it was because things were getting more automated. Things were going up to that next level. Other companies were taking cost out, and we needed to take waste out. And waste is cost. But we weren't looking, and they said, hey, we're not looking to go ahead and get rid of people, but we're also not going to lie to you. It may be that some of you may find that you're in the wrong seat in the bus, and we want to move you from the seat you're in to a different seat. In some cases, it's going to go ahead and change our culture to some degree, and some of you may not want to go ahead and stay. We understand that. We support you. We will help you find another position at another company at that point in time. But we really do encourage you to stay on the bus with us. We want you to go through this change with us, but we also understand it may not be a fit. So, they kind of looked at sides. Is yes, there's going to be changes. Yes, that may not fit for everyone who's currently employed there. And so some may make the choice that they want to go ahead and leave. And we're going to go ahead and help support you, give you some retraining, help you build that resume or create that resume so you can take it to that next employer. Because again, it's not that you're a bad person. It's just that somehow the values, the work, the process no longer aligns with what it is you want to go ahead and do. So again, I think having senior management, senior executives talk about the why, talk about, hey, this is kind of how we're going to do it from a 30,000 foot level. Your local management team will go ahead and work you through some of the details on the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month type of thing. We'll go ahead and let you know, hey, this is what's coming over the next week or the next month, so you can be looking ahead as you go through it and you kind of understand what we're getting to. And by doing that, I mean, we took out a phenomenal amount of waste in our process and saved millions and millions of dollars. And the people who made it through, and we probably kept, I don't know, 85, 90% of them, they actually loved the system after we got there. Transition was tough. Absolutely. It was tough on management. It was tough on the employees, but we all kind of wanted to get through it together because we knew that the other option was we wouldn't exist long-term. We could not keep going the way we were forever. And if we hadn't made the changes, who knows if we would exist 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And they wanted the jobs not only for themselves, but possibly for their next generation, for their community, for their families. So again, I mean, by taking a little bit longer term approach, by talking about the why, by working through the issues, and we had a lot of meetings. We invited anyone, hey, if you have some problems, let's have that conversation, either during work or even after work, and kind of talk you down from the ledge, because there are times that it's going to get stressful on both sides, but we're not looking to get rid of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. I think as you scale, it's easy to hand the delivery of bad news off to someone, a manager that reports to you or something like that, when what the people want to hear is they want to hear from, like you said, the top level, like, hey, who's calling the shots? Because sometimes it feels like, well, this is just manager speak, and they're just telling me what they were told and so on and so forth. Whereas I've made it a point to, when we rolled out our vision for this year, was to go, I went around to every branch and sat in every department meeting and just explained it myself. Like, if you got questions, here's what it is. It's straight from my mouth. This is what you're getting. So definitely think that's extreme. Go ahead.
I think you make another point there too. A lot of times as we communicate down the multiple levels that corporate America has, or even smaller businesses have, we need to make sure we get those managers, those supervisors on board. So it's not, hey, upper management said, it's, they have said, but I've also bought in, I believe it. Because if not, you're right. They're just passing the message and they end up becoming the brunt. They take, especially that first line supervisor, they're taking the crap from the employees, pushing back because they don't understand what's going on. And the manager pushing, oh, we've got to go ahead and enact this next management proposal, this next management improvement type of thing. So we don't want to go ahead and kind of leave that first line supervisor to go ahead and be the punching bag from both sides. So we need to make sure we explain it well enough where they buy in, they understand it, they understand the outcomes, they understand the transition, they understand even some of the downside, so they can help those employees manage their way through it much better, rather than just saying, hey, this is another management proposal. Maybe it'll go away, maybe it won't, but we've got to go ahead and do it at least this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where sometimes the message gets skewed, and we wonder why people aren't on the same page, is because the manager, rather than wanting to be the punching bag, delivers the message in such a way that it's contrary to what was actually trying to be delivered. One of the other things, and I asked this question because we go through this here at our business, so I'd like to get your take on it. When it comes to like big projects, so obviously you've probably been in you mentioned a couple of, larger scale projects. They're going to take meetings and, it's going to take a while. What advice would you give when it comes to lifting up a larger project, as there's a point when you can maybe overanalyze things to make sure that it's perfect, versus, hey, I think we're pretty good, we need to go make some mistakes if it's something that we've never done?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's like an 80% rule. If you can come up with an 80% plan or an 80% idea, that's probably good enough to go ahead and launch it. Because if you go to 100%, some business condition is going to change. You're going to find some obstacle that you could not have, seen ahead of time, foreseen. I mean, COVID would be a great example of that. So, at some point in time, that extra 20% might go ahead and create huge delays in launching the project, and therefore huge delays in receiving the benefit from the project. So if you can get to about 80% where you think you're pretty good, and you've got a great team to go ahead, support and flex and make changes and make adjustments on the fly, probably about the best time to launch. I was working with a plant down in Mexico, and their culture was they didn't want to be embarrassed by putting out anything at 80%. They wanted it absolutely perfect. They wanted to plan and plan. It's like, no, I don't care if you plan it to perfection. It's still not going to go ahead and deploy to perfection. Get to about 80%. Nobody's going to think less of you. Put it out there, and you'd be surprised at the input you'll get back. I mean, another axiom I like to go ahead and say, I never like to start with a clean sheet of paper in working with a team, because a clean sheet of paper, everyone sits there, doesn't know what to go ahead and put on it. I would rather throw out a plan that I know is phenomenally wrong, because humans are great at providing criticism and feedback and input. So even starting out with, well, this is the objective, and this is kind of what I was thinking. Well, they'll tear it apart and they'll come up with something much better. But starting with a blank sheet, if you'd say, hey, we want to go ahead and implement X, Y, Z. How should we do it? What are the steps? What are the milestones? How long should it take? You'll hear a room full of crickets. But if you say, hey, we want to go ahead and implement X, Y, Z, I think we can go ahead and do it in 6 months. And every 2 months, this is our milestone. You'll all of a sudden see that, well, no, it'll probably take us 5 months, or it'll take us 7 months. And we can go ahead and do every 6 weeks, do a milestone. And all of a sudden now they've got ownership. They've bought in. They feel like they've played a role. So, I mean, much better project, much better planning, much better implementation and deployment, simply because they had a chance to tear apart something that, that they didn't have to worry was theirs, number one, and they didn't have to start from a blank sheet of paper where somebody would think, oh, well, that's their idea, so therefore they have to go ahead and take all responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's a key in your example of the factory in Mexico. Sometimes we don't communicate enough that, hey, I trust you to do this, and if something breaks, it's okay. Like, I'm not putting this all on you. Like, I put you in charge because you're the best to do it. But if we don't, I always say, if we don't break anything, then we waited far too long to launch it. Like,
absolutely.
We've got to break some stuff because that's where we're going to learn. We're not going to, and I think that your 80% rule, I wrote that down. I'm going to give that to the team. That last 20 is going to be stuff, especially if you've never done it, which is the majority of large projects. That's where you're going to really learn and refine it, rather than get to 100. It takes 3 months longer. And guess what? You're probably still going to break some stuff. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And, you spend all this extra time planning on something that you're ultimately going to change at the end.
No, I like that. If you're not breaking things, you're not making mistakes, same type of thing, you're not learning, you're not making improvements, you're not moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in speed. Some people don't like my speed of things, but to me, speed is how you grow, because it allows you to make mistakes, correct them quickly, keep moving, as opposed to just sitting idle and waiting for something to happen.
Well, but a corollary to speed is agility, because you can't use speed if you're not agile, if you're not flexible, if you can't go ahead and take a punch or two and make a course correction very quickly and go. So I love the kind of the start with speed, knowing that it brings along with it agility.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that as well. Well, Chuck, tell me a little bit about this book. You said you'd spent 4 months writing, 5 months getting it published there. Tell us a little bit about this book and some of the topics that you explore in it.
The book was written kind of for all levels of leaders. I mean, you can be a solopreneur and get value out of it. You can go ahead and be a corporate head of a department and get value out of it. I mean, and that's what we wanted to go ahead and do. We kind of went through leadership, starting with the values, the purpose, the vision, the mission, and work all the way through a lot of different problems that you might go ahead and see. I mean, I wrote the book where you can read it cover to cover, or you can also go ahead and go through the back, through the index, find a problem that you're having, take a look at it, see how a possible solution would be offered, and go ahead and just read that part that's value added to you right then and there. And we talk about communication, methods and modes. Had people previously would send me an email, and then they'd call me on the phone. Hey, did you get the email? Well, yeah, email system's working. That works fine. Did you read it? No. My background was I only read emails 3 times a day, 7 a.m., 11 a.m., and 4 p.m. I didn't have time to go ahead and deal with it. So if it was something urgent, call me. If you call me, that synchronous communication, I'll get it immediately. You'll know I got it immediately. But let's think about it. If you're going to send it to me email, then I may not even get to one of those 3 periods, because I may say, well, it's an FYI. It's not something I need right now. I have other priorities and that kind of thing. So we talk about synchronous versus asynchronous communication. We talk about how to get emails noticed a little bit more with great subject lines. If it's an FYI, say it's an FYI. If it's urgent or it needs a response is required, and when is that response required, put that in the subject line. We talk about meetings. I mean, some companies have lots, some companies don't. And, if the meeting doesn't have an objective, what do we hope to gain by the end of this meeting? Chances are it's not a meeting you want to attend. And if the meeting is like a decision and you're either a decision maker or the decision will impact you or your area, absolutely, you may have to attend. But if it doesn't impact your area, if you're not the decision maker, question whether you should go ahead and attend, because it's just going to go ahead and be a time suck. I mean, it's going to go ahead and kill time. Is it a value added? There are great ways to go ahead and put out FYI information. So that's what bulletin boards are about. That's what email can go ahead and be. But necessarily having a meeting for every piece of thing that we want to communicate to everybody, not always the best. Doesn't mean that you don't want to get in front of all the employees periodically. And I think that is important, having a town hall or whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't mean you do it for every little thing that comes out. So we talk about some lean principles. We talk about some project management. We talk about process and methodology. So I think it's and I try and use experiences that my wife and I went through over the last, 5-10 years, dealing with contractors, because I think many of us have had that experience. But we don't talk about just the bad. We talk about some good things too. We had a contractor knocked on the front door. We had an appointment. Opened the door. He says, "Hang on a second." He puts on little booties. My wife immediately saw that. Said, "Why are you putting on the booties?" "Well, I don't want to bring dirt into your house." She says, "I love you." Immediately. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't fixed anything. He hadn't looked at anything. He hadn't given us an estimate. Probably the estimate could have been 10% higher. My wife still would have said, "I love you," just because he didn't track dirt in. Now, the booties cost him something, but on an overall scale, it was almost nothing. We've had a contractor also. I said, I was working with, said, you could give your clients, you can give your customers a little something extra. Well, but, then it changes the price. I said, no, you can do something for nearly free. I said, let's say you're building a house and you've got 3 or 4 different paint colors. Go out, get those paint color chips, those little samples. I mean, they are free. Staple them onto a piece of paper and write what room or what, hey, we use this color for the trim, this color for the ceilings. This was the master bedroom. This was the dining room. This was the family room. They can have that for years to come. And if they ever wanted to do some touch up, they ever want to hire a professional painter, they have got a reference sheet. It costs nothing, but it really went ahead and separated that contractor from all the other contractors out there, because not everybody does a little bitty thing like that. So, I mean, there are little things that we can do that cost virtually nothing, and we'll go ahead and make our customer our best ally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of great stuff there. in the book, and definitely a lot of stuff that we can learn. I will pass along. When my dad was still in the business, he used to send emails and then literally walk down to my office and asked if I got it. So I was like, I'm probably pretty sure it's probably in there somewhere. But I assume you want to talk to me about it. So you probably could have just walked down here first. All good stuff. Chuck, I really can't thank you enough for all of your advice and wisdom that you've shared on the podcast today. I'm certain that listeners can get something out of this, out of your book, and if potentially they want to explore a relationship with your company, obviously you have learned a lot, and I think the most important thing is your willingness to share that with others and spread that knowledge. So again, Chuck, thanks so much for being a guest on Can't Stop the Growth.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listeners, that concludes our episode with Chuck. If you want to reach out to him, we'll have all his information in the show notes so that you can reach out to him, get a copy of the book. As always, again, I think today's episode was a definite testament to the power of leadership and the power of communication and how that can push your company forward. So keep growing out there. Until next time, we'll see you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, I would greatly appreciate if you would rate the show or share it with someone who might enjoy it. As the name suggests, we are always looking to grow, so let me know in the comments what you thought and if there is anything you would like to hear on future episodes. Come back again soon, and always keep growing out there.